I'd like to speak to some of the ethics and methodology when you are actually documenting, whether it be a heartbreaking news story or something more long-term where you're involved in a delicate story. And there's a lot of things to consider. One thing that we consider, and a lot of people get too caught up in, is just about the way you're going to tell the story, what the photographs are going to be. Are you going to please your editor? What do they want? But more and more often when we're working in some of these zones is that as foreign photographers entering these places, we are there and then we are gone. And more often times than not, we facilitate our work by using fixers, translators, local people who are knowledgeable and know good sources in these countries. And for us, it's easy to go to the airport and leave. For them, they live there. Their actions in helping us, in exploring stories, sensitive stories that they are not really removed from, but they are part of, the consequences for them can be dire. In places like Iraq, this was extremely evident, Afghanistan, zones of conflict, but even places like if you're going to go explore gangs of El Salvador or something, if you're going into a neighborhood controlled by MS-13 or something and the person is helping you, the translator, they have to stay in San Salvador. And if your publication comes out and it's very critical of what's going on in this neighborhood, that person's life can be in jeopardy, their well-being. So these are a lot of things that we need to think about. If and as more and more people are taking pictures, and everybody is now, every cell phone, every iPhone. I mean, even as a professional photographer, eventually I think, oh, my work is going to be done with a tiny little phone. I'll be on the phone and shooting multimedia, and it's all coming to that. The quality is getting so amazing. But as citizen journalists, people who see something, the bus bombing, for example, in London, all the photographs, the powerful photographs that came out of that were from citizens that were on that bus that, had to endure that horrible tragedy. Iraq, the most powerful photographs I feel to come out of Iraq were the photos from Abu Ghraib that were taken by the people who were actually committing these heinous acts. Ethically, I mean, the way we approach it, and the way hopefully all journalists approach it and should approach it, is that you don't create the scene, you don't manipulate the scene, you document what's there, you document what's in front of you. You let those candid moments dictate themselves, and then you hope you're savvy enough and quick enough to make them real, beautiful, and candid. You don't want to set anything up. Obviously, if you're shooting a portrait, that's different. That's a setup situation from the beginning, from the get-go. But you want to be sensitive to your subjects. Exploitation is a word that's thrown around a lot, and it can be used appropriately on some imagery. But the greatest imagery, the one that kind of rises above that, is that, yes, there are people suffering or people going through hardship, but they retain their dignity. They retain dignity, and it's very important that you do that with the camera, and that's why it can get very, very difficult. The sensational can be quite simple, but the subtleties involved in making a sensational picture powerful and having some dignity for the subjects and not exploiting them, that's a tough part. That's a really, really tough part. And it's really hard to be successful at that. I wish I could have more examples where I actually pulled that off, but it's very, very tough. But we need to be fair, we need to be honest, we need to be merciless in our coverage, especially if we're documenting these financial illegalities going on, for example, with the hubrisness of Wall Street and what's been going on in corporate America and the disparity that's being created between the rich and the poor, for example. And if you have an opinion on this, it's going to come out in your work. You can be as objective as you want to be, supposedly, but it's really hard to remain that objective. Ethically, be fair though. Be fair, but be merciless in your coverage. Be relentless on it. If it is happening, you want to make sure that people know that it's happening. Don't be on the periphery of it, but be in the heart of it, because that's our responsibility to take the readers to the heart of that. And those citizens that are going to have their cameras about and shooting little things that are going on in their neighborhoods, who knows their neighborhood better than they do? It's their backyard. So they will already have that responsibility because they don't want to do something that's going to destroy their own neighborhood. So it's very important to keep that in mind. And Photoshop, don't go crazy with Photoshop. Just you really want to we just do the basics with Photoshop as journalists. If you're doing fine art, run with it. It's a fantastic program. It's got so many great things that you can do. But all we do is a little bit of cropping on an image, some burning and dodging, as it were, much like when we were in the darkroom. And that's it. We don't do much else. We do as little as possible to the image. And then we send it to the paper, and then the paper publishes it. You do more than that, you start manipulating it, I mean, I would be in the unemployment line.